better way to kick off the podcast series with our CEO, Rob Mallernee. Rob, how are you? It's great to have you on the show.
Doing great, Mark. Glad to be here.
Hey, let's get right into it. What a better way to start than just to kind of talk about the origins of Eton Solutions. Tell me a little bit about, the founder story.
No, I think, I didn't really come at this as a software person. This was really more of trying to solve my own problem. And a little background, I spent about 9 years as a public accountant with Price Waterhouse and Arthur Andersen doing tax work, got an MBA in finance and a CFA, and then got into the trust business serving ultra high net worth clients, first for a small independent trust company. And there we really did a lot of work to try to figure out from a process point of view, what's the best way to run an ultra high net worth office. And at the time, this was back in the 90s, had done a lot of process management work and tried to operationalize that through technology, but the technology really just wasn't ready for what we were trying to do. So we ultimately grew that company from about 500 million to 3 billion and then sold it to US Trust, which was a $150 billion, very high-end, ultra high net worth wealth management shop, 150-year-old, great company. And there I opened the first ultra high net worth office for them outside of New York. And once again, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we do this process better, faster, cheaper, with less risk. One thing led to another, and ultimately, as things would happen, Bank of America bought US Trust, and most of our clients were not incredibly excited about being clients of a huge company like that. They had made the decision to be with a boutique. And so one thing led to another, and we created Eton Advisors in 2009. And I'd actually hired Sarah Hamilton from the Family Office Exchange to go and interview all of our clients, ask them what they wanted us to do. And they all wanted us to start our own firm, which we did. And so when we did that, we had to figure out our solution, our technology. And what I was most concerned about was a couple of things. One, how do we create a technology or a operating model that's going to allow us to grow the company and create operating leverage? Another, I've been on the Family Office Exchange MFO Council for years and years. And every time we go to those meetings, everybody talks about two things. One, all the great new clients they've brought on. And two, all the problems they have trying to figure out how to actually make money in a multifamily office. And interesting dynamic. And so we really tried to figure out that second question from the beginning of Eton Advisors. And so we were worried with, how do we create operating leverage? And the second thing we wanted to make sure was that, given that we were handling millions of dollars of client assets, we wanted to make sure that everything we did was risk managed. And so those were the two things in the back of our mind as we went about looking for a solution. And we spent a couple years trying to find a solution, couldn't find anything. So we really decided that we had to build it ourselves. And then 3 or 4 years later, once again, I was having lunch with Sarah Hamilton, and we were just talking about what we were doing. And she said, everybody is looking for that solution. You should think about commercializing what you've done. And so we hired a bunch of consultants, and they really loved what we were doing. They loved the data model, loved the concept, how we were creating something that was truly integrated. And we then spun this out into a totally separate company, Eton Solutions, in 2015.
Looking back on kind of the past, decades of this commercialization, what has surprised you kind of the most as part of this journey? And then if you had a chance to kind of go back, kind of what advice would you give yourself?
I think the most surprising thing is the vast complexity of what it takes to run a family office. How many different things and different skill sets and different processes there are in a family office and how difficult it is to truly create a system that is integrated and efficient at managing that highly complex environment with typically a very small number of people. And so I would say I was very naive at the beginning, thinking that, oh, we'll just do this. It'll take us a couple of years and we'll be done.
Right.
And here we are 14 years later, still evolving. And it's one of those things where it's a constant evolution. And I'm sure our product in 5 years will be infinitely better than it is today. And it is certainly infinitely better today than it was 2 years ago. And so there's just a constant evolution. I think the advice that I would give myself would be to hire the best people you can find faster. And I think over time, we are 13 or 14 years into the building of the platform. We're about 8 years into the building of the company. And, today we have an incredible team. But I think what I would do is try to build that team faster and make sure that I had the best skill sets in all the positions sooner, as quickly as you can, figure out what's really required to create a world-class company and then bring those resources in.
So how does, Eton Solutions fit into that ecosystem, and how is the firm kind of positioned in the marketplace to help these firms?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite sayings is people always say, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. And the reason I like that saying is because I think in a way it's true, and another way I think it's absolutely false. And the reason our business exists is because in some cases it's false, while everybody believes that it's true. And what I mean by that is when you're looking at a family office, obviously the family dynamics, maybe the investment strategy, how you have to plan their tax and estate strategies around the family dynamics, what the goals of the family are, and the investment strategy has to be wrapped around whatever the asset was that created the wealth in the first place, if it's still owned. There's a lot of uniqueness to every family office. However, I think the insight we had early on was there's a lot of things that if you have 100 family offices, there are best practices. So I don't think you should have 100 different ways of paying a bill or reconciling your bank account or generating a financial statement. And I think the positioning of Eton Solutions in the market is be really careful and thoughtful about what is unique about every family office and allow that to be preserved, while at the same time looking at all the things. And we've mapped about 270 processes in family offices. And of those 270 processes, probably 200 of them should be standardized using best practice. And that's what our business is all about, is taking those things that are somewhat complicated, standardizing them, automating them, constantly working to make them more and more efficient over time. And the other challenge, as you mentioned, there's only a few people in most family offices, or even if there are several, dozen people in a family office, 270 processes is a lot of things to manage. And part of the problem is that you need these skill sets to do all this. However, you may only need certain skill sets once a day for 8 hours a day. You can hire full-time people for that. There are other things you need 20 minutes a day, or once every 2 weeks, or once a month, or once a quarter. And it's very hard to find and hire exceptionally good people who can fill the need in those small amounts of time. So being able to create a company that allows us to fill in those gaps and provide that 20 minutes a day, or that 2 hours a week, or 3 hours a month type of service to a family office allows them to really focus on dealing with the unique aspects of their family and family office, while benefiting from all the work that we and our clients have done to standardize those other 200 things that, as long as they get done well, nobody's really looking to have a bespoke way of making sure the bills get paid.
Do that. Yeah. I think that's a great point, Rob. And I do love that quote. Like, you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. And while there's a grain of truth in that, and that people form, especially single family offices for customization based on the needs of that particular family, not every family office is a snowflake, right? Like, you can kind of
No,
bear down on four, maybe five different type of business models. There is a commonality and a core across these business models. And like you said, some of these core tasks can be institutionalized with technology, and those best practices can be built into the system, so they don't have to recreate the wheel every single time on every single practice, right?
absolutely. As you know, there are several types of family offices that you see. There are investment focused family offices where the people in the office are really focused on investments and want to spend their time looking for alpha, trying to figure out how they're going to continue to increase the wealth of the family, and really don't want to spend a lot of their time doing what I would call the plumbing and reporting and all the other things that absolutely have to be done, but it's not the skill set or the focus of those folks. And then you have other offices where it's more of an accounting focused office or a legally focused office.
Administrative
And
family office, right. How would you characterize the state of the family office industry, and where do you see the industry needing to go?
one of the things that kind of struck me, I spent 2 or 3 years at the University of Chicago studying, all the latest and greatest business management trends, and then follow that after leaving school. And one of the things that really struck me when I was working in the industry is that there are all kinds of things that are best practice that have been applied in the businesses that generally created the wealth that these families are managing. And yet those practices have not been applied to the family office.
Right.
And I think part of that is due to the fact that most family offices are run by CPAs, lawyers, or CFAs, and they just don't have that curiosity about that type of thing or the training in those types of areas. And until you get to a very large family office, relatively speaking, those just don't seem to be the kind of the focus of people's attention. And I think what maybe in the last 10 years or more, 5 years, we're starting to see people come to the industry and starting to say, let's apply some business process reengineering. Let's apply some lean thinking. Let's apply all of these different industry standard techniques that not every other, but most other industries have applied to great effect. Those need to be applied in the family office industry. And part of that is thinking about things in a certain way and making sure that your processes are running efficiently and that you are outsourcing things that aren't your core competency while maintaining things that are going to differentiate you and make you truly successful in the industry. And so I think there's a laundry list of things that the family office industry needs to be thinking about. And I would say 10 or 15 years ago, hardly anybody was thinking about this stuff. Whereas today, I think it's much more top of mind. And part of that is things like cybersecurity and how your technology works. And I think the pandemic really forced people to recognize that they were living in the 19th century or the 20th century, not the 21st century. What I call manila folder processes, where you start with a manila folder and you do your thing and then you take it to the desk next to you. Well, that world doesn't work anymore
With rubber
with the
approval
pandemic.
stamps and those type of
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
And, putting paper into folders, date folders to remember to do something. And then, sometimes it falls in between the cracks and doesn't get done. And, it's just that all that was pretty common 5 years ago, even. But I think with COVID and the pandemic, people could not run their business in that manner anymore. And we've seen a huge rush for people to try to figure out, okay, how do I get up to speed and into the 21st century? And now with people working remotely, I also have to figure out how do I provide access to my people and my family members, my clients, wherever they might be in the world, so that they can participate in the process. You've seen a huge acceleration in the need to kind of get up to speed with more modern best practice. And I think that is really what everybody in the industry is trying to figure out, while at the same time continuing to be focused on investments and estate and tax planning and family governance and all the other critically important things that people have to worry about. And so I think what we're trying to do is really worry about a lot of that stuff, the best practice piece of it, and then offer that expertise to other clients so that they can focus on those other things that are top of mind for them. I think the other key thing that we would be remiss not to mention is that family offices are all about the people in the family office. And today, just like there's a competition to find the best investments, there's also a pretty severe competition to find the best people to serve your family and your clients. And I think what's happening now is people realize that if you have antiquated processes and you're forcing highly skilled people
Right.
to do very mundane kind of work, your odds of keeping those people long term are going to go down dramatically. And the person who has more state of the art technology, where the technology is doing more of the grunt work and allowing the individuals, the people, to do analytical work, or figuring out what the trends are, or interacting with the clients, that's a much better job, a much better, higher job satisfaction type of environment. And I think people are starting to realize that they have to pay attention to that, and that people have options. And the staff, your ability to hire and retain great people is dependent on your operating environment to a great degree.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think a lot of family offices have historically leaned towards human capital versus technology to solve certain problems. And I think some ways maybe it was generational, where you certainly take a look at millennials and others that kind of grew up digitally native, look at, like, rekeying data into multiple systems and spreadsheets, and look at that and say, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And like you said, to your point, using outdated technology where they could be doing a lot more value added type of client facing type of activities. I always say, instead of, there's such a push to just get all this information into the system, they can't do the analysis of that data and say, hey, why is there so much cash in that account? It's just so hard to
Yeah.
be able to get that number right. And you're really seeing
I think
that, whether it's generational or whether it's just people don't want to do it anymore, and they want to focus on more satisfaction. But I think that's a great point, Rob.
I, I think the other trend that is, across all industries, not just the family office, is a generational shift. To your point, the days of providing a quarterly report to the family 45 days after the end of the
Right.
quarter, I think those days are numbered, and that the 45 to 50-year-old G2 people want more access. And certainly by the time you get to the 25-year-old G3s, they expect to be able to see their data every day. My children live in Manhattan, and they have some friends who are incredibly wealthy. Maggie can see her net worth on her phone every day.
Right.
Now, she doesn't have a horribly complicated situation, but if I were one of her friends who does have a family office, I would be asking myself, why can she have that and I can't? And then, if you're in the family office, running that family office, trying to explain to that third generation wealth owner that, well, it's complicated and therefore you're going to get this 45 days after the end of the quarter. Once their friends start having that, who are similarly positioned to them, I don't think that's going to be a defensible position. And I think people have to get away from and this is just applying lean principles, which is things happen one at a time. You don't wait and do a batch at the end of the quarter or a batch at the end of the month. You process stuff as it happens. And so going from a monthly or a quarterly mindset to a daily or ultimately, I think it'll end up being a real-time mindset. As things happen, they'll go in. But today, going to a daily mindset that when something happens yesterday, I can see that on my mobile app, or I can see it on my client portal. That's the other thing that people are going to have to figure out. How do I get that done? And
Yeah, that
because as
commercialization of
that,
IT, right? In their everyday lives, they deal with
yep,
technology that's seamless and easy to use and provides them information instantaneously. There's instantaneous
yep,
gratification, and then comes to the family office, and then you're looking at 60 days after the quarter, and you get a paper statement, and only like 10% of that information is really relevant to what
exactly.
somebody's looking for. Like those days are over. I guess this kind of leads us into kind of one of the biggest trends that is happening in the industry right now, that is almost seamlessly kind of, I know it hasn't been, overnight, that it's been brewing for a long time, but the impact of AI and how you see AI impacting the family office industry. How do you see AI impacting the family office, and what should firms be thinking about in this area?
We've done a huge amount of work here. We are, as you know, we're cloud native, part of Azure at Microsoft. I think we're the only family office wealth management system that's part of the Microsoft OpenAI partnership. And we're actually have quite a few things in beta right now that we're going to roll out in the first half of next year. And I think this is coming way faster than people think it is. I think people think this is a 5 to 10 year thing. I think the nature of work in the family office is going to be fundamentally different 18 to 24
Yeah.
months from now. There are a lot of things that people do in family offices today that if you need 10 people to do it today, you're going to need one person to do it a year and a half from now. And I think these things fall into two different, or maybe three buckets. The first is just mundane stuff, processing invoices, bringing in documents, having those documents tagged, indexed, sorted, bringing in manager statements and creating mark-to-markets, updating the value of the assets based on those manager statements. All of those things, and reconciling your bank accounts. Name, anything that is kind of a predictable, repeatable process. AI is going to make those jobs go away. And then you're going to have something where it's more like somebody is watching the AI, and if the AI runs into a problem, the person will push things along rather than somebody actually doing the work. And it's kind of an analogy for this is my son's a trader, and in the old days, people would make trades and they'd figure out what they wanted to do. They'd call the broker and do the
Right.
trade. Today, Jim has a team of people and they write software, and the software does the trading, and they just watch it, make sure it's doing what they want it to do. And I think that's where the family office world is going. And I think people who don't understand that are going to get taken back. The other piece of this is what's come about from the Chat GPT world. Imagine a case where every time you get a new document, instead of you spending hours or however long reading it, summarizing it, try to organize it, you create for every type of document, you create a prompt. And then that prompt is used along with a, Eton GPT, which is a version that we've created of GPT that is specific to the family office world, so that as you're loading your tax return into the system's automatically creating a summary that says whose tax return is this, which government entity, what form number is it, what's the taxable income, what's the tax paid, all the things that you would want to know about a tax return are just automatically getting summarized and put on a schedule for you, or put into the database and made available to the clients. And then even beyond that, being able to look across all of your clients and see trends about, what's going on with the tax returns across the client base. Are people's income going up or down? Nobody does this today because it's just so much work to do it. I think going forward, these kind of questions that, really people didn't ask because it was just too much mundane work to answer them are going to be pretty easily answered in the future, assuming you have all your data in one integrated database,
Right.
and you have a system where there are closed loops where people can help the AI when it needs assistance. And AI, I don't think necessarily replaces people. It just makes those people way more effective. And so that kind of mundane stuff that we would like to be able to have done without having to do it ourselves, I think that will be totally transformed in the next 18 to 24 months. And then obviously the other thing is doing things like spotting trends, creating data mining more. How do I look across my client base and figure out what's going on? How do I use the data to determine, well, this, I've got 100 family members. Well, this family member's on a bad path because, their spending is out of line with their resources, and all kinds of other ways that AI can help answer or give us an early warnings system about all types of different things, or just creating opportunities in the system, and things as simple as, when does my insurance policy expire?
Right.
That stuff just can be part of when I load the document, load the new insurance policy. ChatGPT tells me what the expiration dates are and updates the database. I don't have to have somebody creating and scheduling all that stuff and then monitoring it, because the system will be able to do it for you. So, that's a hugely broad subject, but I do think that, we've been talking about this stuff for 15 years. The difference between, as an example, we use a invoice processing tool that Microsoft created. And 2 years ago, we tried to do this. And the best in class software at the time was right about 70% of the time, which is really not good enough for
Not
people
good
to
enough.
want to mess with it. This Microsoft tool, we've run thousands of invoices through this thing in 14 different languages, including Japanese and Mandarin. And it is almost flawless. It is unbelievably good. It's 99%.
Yeah, this
And
is no
so I think,
OCR technology that we're talking about here.
yeah, yeah. And it's specific, Microsoft has trained this on millions of invoices. And this is one of the key things going forward is are you positioned to take advantage of these technologies? And what's going on is people like Microsoft and AWS, Amazon, are creating all these phenomenal tools. But if you want to take advantage of these tools, you have to be in their cloud and you
Yeah.
have to be cloud native. And so I think that's part of AI is it is going to force you to make some decisions about your technology and what type of technology you use if you want to be able to take advantage of the huge improvements that are going to happen in the next several years.
You
Yeah,
look at so much information that family offices have to deal with is unstructured data. It comes in documents, right?
that's
Invoices,
right.
a whole alternative investment world never left the 90s. It went from
No,
a document into like a digital PDF, but never got structured information, right? So
and
all that becomes easily accessible, becomes structured information, that low value first mile type of activities goes away. And like you said, to your prompt, to be able to look across, hundreds, thousands of subscription agreements and be able to see outliers and to be able to do liquidity forecasting better. It just wasn't even possible just because of the nature of the data and how manual that process was before. So
I always tell everyone, to really take advantage of AI, you need all your data in one place, one system, and you need closed loop systems so the people can help the AI when it need be. And I wish
yeah,
I was smart enough to say that I had thought ahead and planned that. Unfortunately, I wasn't that smart. However, we were lucky enough that just has to be, that is happens to be the way our system works.
Yeah.
And so I think we're incredibly well positioned to take advantage of these things. And I think you're going to see huge wins in the platform in the first half of 2024.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, this has been great. I want to be on the podcast. This was a great conversation, and look forward to having more of these with you.
Thanks, Mark.